everybody. It's good to be here again. Thank you for listening in or watching wherever you are. And by the way, wherever you are listening or watching, please hit subscribe. Give me a good rating wherever you can, if possible. And also, if you'd like to support what I'm doing, please visit my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Mark Vicente. I would appreciate any help I can get. So today I want to talk about a film called Oblivion. And I do want to address Tom Cruise because I think some of my former Scientology friends will be like, dude, why are you pumping this guy's tires? I'm not pumping his tires. I will explain as the episode goes on. There is a lot of irony in what I'm about to discuss. But I want to talk about Oblivion because, first of all, it's one of my favorite films ever. I love science fiction in general. You know, I love Star Trek, I love Star Wars, I love most really good science fiction films because in science fiction, you get to explore really, really deep things that you may not be able to, in, let's say dramas or comedies or horror. Although horror, you can actually explore pretty deep things. But science fiction, to me, you get to pull away from the normal world and you get to talk about themes and patterns and all kinds of things that apply to the current world, but in the sort of science fiction genre. So Oblivion is directed by Joseph Kosinski, who's an incredible director. And it's actually based on a graphic novel that he wrote, and then it got turned into a screenplay, and he ended up directing it. I think it was in 2011 or 2012, maybe. The script that I read was written in 2011. The final film is a little different from the script that I read, so I think a bunch of changes were made right before shooting. Joseph Kosinski also directed Tron, I think it was Only the Brave, and of course, the recent Top Gun. Ex-Scientologists, don't shit on me yet. Hold on. The film is incredible because it's a metaphor for what's been going on in the cult world and probably society in general. Let me try and tell you the story really quickly. And by the way, if you have not seen Oblivion and would like to, I'm going to spoil everything. So maybe stop now, go and watch the film. It really is that good. And then come back. It starts with Tom Cruise's character, Jack, and his sort of assistant, Vika. But they're also in a relationship together, it seems. And this is way in the future, 2070 something. And the Earth has been pretty much wiped out. There's civilization's pretty much gone. And he's a drone repairman, and she's sort of the air traffic controller that stays at home. And it's beautiful and futuristic. And there's this all these floating things that are pulling hydrogen out of water, but there's nobody alive anymore really except them and these things called the scavengers. And floating up in space is this massive pyramidal three-sided pyramid called the Tet. And the Tet, we're told, and they believe, is where most of the humans went and then went on to Titan, the Titan system. And the story we understand is that there was a war, and the scavengers blew up the moon and then attacked the Earth, and the humans fought back. And the scavengers, these awful, awful creatures, the humans fought back. And eventually the humans won, but the Earth was wiped out. And now, many, many years later, they're extracting resources from the Earth, and the idea is that Jack, played by Tom Cruise, who's this drone guy, drone repairman, and his partner Vika are going to go up to the Tet in 2 weeks' time, and then on to Titan. So their shift is almost over. And the other thing that's interesting is that their memories have been wiped. We're not totally sure why, but their memories have been wiped. I want to read you the opening monologue read by Tom Cruise, his character Jack, and it goes as follows. It's really fascinating. He says, "They arrived almost half a century ago. Aliens, scavs, whatever you want to call them. Their idea of how do you do was to blow up our moon. Without her moon, the Earth went insane. Most were killed in the floods as the cities came down, as everything caught fire. A year later, their ground troops landed to exterminate whoever was left. They were probably surprised what we were willing to do to survive. We used nukes. We won the war, but lost the battle. Humanity had to flee the Earth. We had to unlearn what it meant to call something our home. Now we live on the Tet, our man-made moon. a temporary home before the next step. Everyone's there now. Well, almost everyone. And the whole thing is that him and his partner are still there. And it's a very idyllic kind of life they live. I mean, the production design is extraordinary. Incredibly futuristic hovercraft type thing. The drones are incredible. Everything about their life looks incredible. And the other thing that's really interesting is that there's this woman called Sally who is on the Tet, and she's sort of the sort of controller of everything, and she assigns everybody their jobs and their things. She keeps on saying to Jack and Vika, his partner, "Are you an effective team?" And they always respond, "We're an effective team." And there's this weird, like, overly happy response they keep on giving Sally, "We're an effective team." And this is brought up a number of times during the film, "We're an effective team." And when they talk about the scavs, what the scavs do, the scavengers, what the scavengers do is they keep on trying to shoot down the drones. And the scavs are the ones that apparently, attacked Earth. But they're very primitive. And so, when the drones kill the scavs, they call it scav kills. Now, what makes Tom Cruise's character Jack so complex and so interesting is he keeps on remembering another life, something else. Like he's on top of the Empire State Building with another woman, and it's like this weird memory he keeps having. And we assume, okay, so his memory was wiped, so maybe he's remembering something, but we're not sure what it is. The other thing that's interesting is that there are these radiation zones that they're not allowed to go into. So they have their sort of quadrant that they work in. And he goes out and repairs drones and gets them up and running. And by the way, the drones are fucking terrifying. These things are maniacal killers, But there's these radiation zones that they're not allowed to go beyond. And whenever the craft gets close, they're very nervous and, they steer away from the radiation zone because apparently, you'll die if you go there. The thing about Vika's character that's so interesting, and you get this as the film goes along, is she's very brainwashed. She's very controlled. She follows orders. And Jack, Tom Cruise's character, he wants to try new things. He wants to adventure. You find out at some point that he actually has this in the zone he's not supposed to go. He has this little cabin that he's been building over who knows how many years with all of Earth's things from the past. And he's very fascinated by the past. Vika just follows orders at any cost. And at one point, he's growing a plant in like what looks like an old big shell casing of I don't know, mortar or something. He's growing a flower, which he eventually gives to her, and he hands her the flower. And she immediately takes it and throws it out of their abode, which is up in the clouds, and it falls, and it's gone. And she says to him, you can't bring that in here. Who knows what dangers that will bring in? So you kind of get a sense of her character. Oblivion is in essence, I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but it is in essence about cult members waking up. It's about Tom Cruise waking up. And Vika not waking up, which makes it so interesting. And the other thing is, even when things go south, Sally, who's up in the Tet, will ask Vika, "Are you an effective team?" And then Vika will respond with a big smile, "We're great, never better." And it reminded me of like what it's like, in a cult. When you're asked how you feel, you have to feel good. You have to be feeling top form, ship shape, So I'm going to try and, without going into, every single detail, try and explain what happens. But basically what happens is that Tom Cruise, I should say Jack, runs into these scavengers and discovers that they're not actually who he thought they were, because he hates them. All of these people hate the scavengers. They're these awful creatures that do terrible things. And he begins to find out that they're not actually who he thought they were. And the head of the scavengers is actually Morgan Freeman, who turns out to be human, which is a very, very interesting casting, by the way. Now, also what happens is this module from space lands with these astronauts, and the drones, led by Sally and the Tet, just go and start killing them. And the woman that Tom Cruise has been dreaming about, Jack has been dreaming about, is in one of these cryopods, and he rescues her. And you find out that she was actually his wife, but his memory has gotten wiped. And she remembers, but he doesn't. As the story goes along, you begin to understand that the scavs, the scavengers, are not actually bad. They're actually human beings that survived the war. And Tom Cruise begins realizing, Jack begins realizing that things are not what he thought. So he's been given a certain narrative, and he begins to realize that things are not quite what he was taught. History is not quite what he was taught. He begins to learn bit by bit that his team, the technology team, the TET, might actually be the problem, and that these humans are actually survivors and have been fighting this AI. The TET, turns out, is actually an AI machine, a massive AI machine represented by this woman called Sally. We don't know why yet. And what you begin to find out is this woman he rescued has been up in space for like 60 years. And he also finds out eventually that he's a clone. His name's Jack Harper, but he's a clone because he actually runs into another version of himself. Because what happens at one point is he crosses over into this demarcation zone, this zone of like radiation. He crosses over and he runs into himself. And he begins to piece together that he's actually a clone. And there's many, many clones of him. What Sally has done is has kept all these Jacks, all these versions of Tom Cruise's character separate from each other so they don't know. So in each quadrant, in each area, there is a Jack and there's Vika, his sidekick. Now, what's interesting is that he begins to learn all these things and Vika just can't handle it. She can't take it in. She remains in complete and utter denial. And she, as I said, she follows orders at any cost. And it's almost like she's being overloaded with the truth, and she doesn't want to know the truth. And this is so interesting because whenever a cult starts to break up, there are people like Vika who just go into complete denial. I mean, let's look at NXIVM. There's still people like Vika in NXIVM. They still believe completely. So Sally, it turns out, is basically like a cult leader. She's hidden all this information from Jack and certainly from Vika, but Vika's much more on board. Vika's more like a flying monkey for Sally, the cult leader. And it turns out Sally doesn't exist. So Sally is actually not a real person. Sally is the person that was mission control at NASA like maybe 60 or 70 years ago. And the AI has taken Sally on as a visual representation to make everybody feel safe and comfortable. What you start to see is that you have this, what Jack yearns for is this sort of analog lifestyle. And what the TET represents is this sort of AI digital lifestyle. And this is really interesting, and I'm not going to get into it too much now, but because I have a lot to say about AI at some point. But there is this absolute fascination currently in present time in the Earth with AI. And as you find out in this film, the AI basically just wiped humanity out. And humanity, in many ways, Jack, as a representation of humanity, has just been going along. And Vic has just been going along, and they have all this amazing technology, and they're just going along, which I see very much that happening now. People are just going along with a lot of technological advances because they're so in love with it, and they're not realizing where it could go. There's an amazing moment in the film where Morgan Freeman captures Jack and then lets him back out, and everyone is terrified that now Jack's going to come back and kill them all with the drones. But Morgan Freeman and the humans let them out, and eventually Jack goes and discovers he has a clone, discovers that things are not what he thought they were, and discovers that the TET, the AI, when the astronauts landed, it basically killed all of them except his wife. He realizes that the AI is trying to kill them all, and so when he comes back to Morgan Freeman, the first thing Morgan Freeman says is something like, I told you what you would find out there, and you probably thought I was crazy. And at that point, Tom Cruise's character Jack realizes, no, Morgan's not crazy. But here's the funny thing, when you start to wake up from a cult and realize what's actually going on, everybody inside thinks you're crazy. Everybody who's bought in thinks you're crazy. In fact, and I've said this before, when I began to wake up and I realized that Raniere was branding, women, I basically told people that women are being branded, and they said, that's insane. That is insane. You're insane. Many people thought I was insane. There are a few people that I've reconnected with recently that have said to me, honestly, we thought you were insane. In 2017, we thought you lost your mind, because the narrative was so strong. And this is the thing. The Tet up floating up in space is putting out a particular narrative that Jack, Tom Cruise's character, believes completely. And this is so cool. It's like the hero's journey. He believes so completely in the narrative that he hasn't really questioned it. And when faced with reality, at first he's just so absolutely shocked. Vika just cannot. His partner up in the station just can't handle it. She just cannot handle it, and ends up being killed by the drones. But it is very much what happens, when you wake up and you tell people who are living inside that narrative structure what's going on. They go into full-scale denial at first. And some, when they finally take in the information, they start to realize, holy shit, this is true. And some never do, And there's these archetypes in this film, Jack being somebody that wakes up and Vika being somebody that doesn't wake up. What you finally realize is that the Tet, the AI, was actually the one that took out the moon, was actually the one that attacked Earth, was actually the one that destroyed everything. So the very AI that Jack and Vika have been working for is the one that actually destroyed everything, and then basically took Jack, who turns out to have been the mission commander 60 years before, cloned him and cloned his co-pilot Vika, and now has them all over the planet basically repairing drones and wiping out the Scavs, wiping out the remaining humanity. And this is such a massive perceptual shift for Jack, for Tom Cruise's character Jack, that at first, as I said, he just can't handle it, and eventually he realizes, oh shit, this is what's going on, and then they plot how to destroy the Tet. Now, as I said, this film is about many things. There's a whole love story I'm not even talking about, which is actually very compelling. But the thing I wanted to say to my ex-Scientology friends is, I do recognize the irony of Tom Cruise playing a character, Jack, who wakes up from a digital cult. And I recognize the irony because, as far as I know, Tom Cruise still represents his church and doesn't talk about it at all. But the Scavs are like suppressives, basically. And so I do recognize the irony of it. It's really, really bizarre that he's playing the role of somebody who actually wakes up to a cult and then takes the cult down. Because I have not seen that happen with his particular religion. And the thing is so interesting, this is another sidetrack, but just because somebody plays a role, they're playing a role, There's another film, what was it? The Truman Show, Jim Carrey playing The Truman Show, the sort of another wake-up film, and it turns out I think Jim Carrey actually did wake up because he doesn't like giving journalists what they want, because I think journalists are honestly part of the cult as well. But in the case of Tom Cruise, it's ironic. It's definitely ironic that he supports a system that uses coercion. The very thing in Oblivion, the Tet, the AI, is using coercion and force and violence. He supports a religion that uses coercion and basically marginalizes or shuns people, I should say, and even goes after them when they speak out or disagree. Because that's what suppressives are. In NXIVM we had suppressives, and in Scientology, apparently there are suppressives as well. So I want to get to the inside of the Tet and my whole understanding of that. But first, let me just back up and go back again to the way that the narrative, the Tet, the AI, convinces Jack and his Vika and all the other Jacks and all the other Vikas what their narrative is, and that they're supposed to hate the Scavs. And they do hate the Scavs. They try to kill them at any opportunity with the drones. This us versus them marginalization. This us versus them marginalization, my God, that's a difficult word, is something that I've been talking about for quite a while on the podcast. And the reason I wanted to talk about, the reason I mentioned the title of NXIVM 9, I want to talk about them is because some people know the stories, many maybe don't. The NXIVM 9 were a group of 9 women who I think it was 2008 or 9, began to see what was going on in NXIVM, in ESP. And they approached Raniere to try to talk to him about the things that they thought were going on. All the things that we later found out were true. Now, the way that it was represented inside NXIVM, inside the narrative structure of NXIVM, was that these people were trying to extort money from Raniere and from the corporation, and they were just disgruntled. They were just disgruntled, unhappy women. And some of them had done criminal things. But we were convinced that they were the scavs, that they were the suppressive, because we were told that. And we were not going anywhere else to get any other information. The narrative was so powerful, and to go somewhere else, like if we were to go and look at like some other, independent journalism somewhere outside of the NXIVM narrative structure, that was being part of the suppressive problem. So we didn't do that. We just believed what we were told. Now, were we correct? No, we were absolutely fucking wrong, like completely wrong. And just like in the movie Oblivion, we think at first that these scavs are these awful people, and it turns out they're not. It was the same way. The NXIVM 9 were considered scavs. They were considered suppressives. And in 2017, when a number of us woke up, we finally realized, holy shit, that is not true. That was a complete, utter lie. And then we learned the hell that they went through. Two in particular, there are actually 9 altogether. I won't mention all the other names because they're less public, but 2 in particular are Susan Dones and Barbara Boucher. And they went through absolute hell fighting the organization and having to deal with their former friends who now thought that they were criminals, which, by the way, is exactly what happened in 2017 with those of us that came out. Now our former friends turned against us and thought we were suppressives, we were scavs, and wanted to have nothing to do with us. And some of them signed on to engaging in sort of indictments against us. They just signed on thinking it was true. And as far as I know, have not yet issued an apology, FYI. So I think this whole us versus them, they're the suppressives, they're the scavs, is a very important thing to understand. And that's what this movie does so well. And as I said before, this is what's so ironic about Tom Cruise playing the role of somebody who wakes up from a cult and then goes after the cult and destroys it. And the reason I wanted to talk about the Tet for a second is what Tom Cruise does is he goes on the suicide mission. And he basically goes in to blow up the Tet. And when he goes into the Tet, there's all these drones. It's very dangerous and everything. But the way it's been represented inside the AI, three-sided moon thing, it's like a cathedral. It's like this religious cathedral. And at one point, when he challenges Sally, the AI, Sally says, "I am your God." And basically what he says is, "Fuck you, Sally." And it's such a powerful moment, undercut, unfortunately, by the irony that it's Tom Cruise saying that, because it would be good if Tom Cruise actually stood up to some of the bad things that are happening in his religion. Sally says, I am your God. And it's a mind-blowing moment because I think it's what every one of us needs to do to stand up against whatever narrative structure is being enforced upon us that may not be true. I think that's really important. I was just thinking back, and I wrote this down. There's this great moment where Morgan Freeman's character actually captures Jack and has him tied up and with bright lights and everything. This is the moment that Jack is about to realize, holy shit, these are not creatures; these are humans. And he says, Morgan Freeman says to Tom Cruise's character Jack, "Have you ever met a scav up close?" "No, of course not. You just repair the damage. Keep the drones up and killing. Don't go into the radiation zone. Don't ask many questions, do you, Jack? Not part of the job description." And this is the thing I also keep thinking about, because, Vika's character is basically, she will die for the cult in the end, and she gets killed by the cult in the end. But this whole thing about just going along, just taking orders, I think we're at a point in the world right now where just taking orders is not a legitimate excuse anymore. There are things that are going on right now. AI is the genie that's just been let out of the bottle. And I have deep concerns about it, because people are going to use it in all kinds of ways that are really a huge problem. And I'm wondering what happens when cults are actually built by AI, when AI learns everything about the human condition. Everything about the human condition, and knows how to play a human being like an instrument. Could AI become a god? Is that possible? And I think it is possible. I think it's entirely possible. And I think, Oblivion is such an amazing film because it raises all these incredible questions. And this is why, as I said, I love sci-fi. Because sci-fi, you can talk about so many deep things. There are so many layers in Oblivion. And Joseph Kosinski is a fucking genius of a director. I mean, a genius. This man's mind is absolutely extraordinary. So if you haven't watched it yet and you've listened to this whole thing and I've ruined it for you completely, do yourself a favor and still go watch it. It's still that good. It is to me like almost a perfect film. There are certain issues I have about it, and it's very sort of American in its slant and its perspective. But there are some things in there that are absolutely profound. So I want to, I really want to caution everybody, I never want to get political, but I really want to caution everybody to look very carefully at the narrative structures that we live inside of. Because let's say, there's a moment in the film where Jack is trying to tell Vika the truth and she can't handle it. And in some ways, Jack is like the modern day equivalent of a conspiracy theorist. He believes in something that's so fucking whacked and radical. He's starting to believe that the Tet that they work for are actually the bad guys and that they're actually the ones killing humans. And he's starting to put this together and she cannot handle it. In fact, she is willing to have him killed by the drones for what he's beginning to suggest. So Tom Cruise's character is the representation to some degree of a conspiracy theorist in that structure. And I keep on going on about this us versus them thing. Like there's us and there's them. What you believe about them, who taught you what to believe about them? Because probably it didn't come from face-to-face interaction. Because usually when you have face-to-face interaction, you kind of get a sense of who somebody is. Probably the theming, the otherizing, came from some story that you heard, read, were told. And often that story comes from people that shouldn't be called journalists, but are. You were taught who to otherize. Really stop and think. Because what if we were way in the future and AI was so sophisticated that it was running, using huge tech companies to run a narrative? Would you know? This is one of the things that Oblivion doesn't really bring this up, but to me, it's such an interesting question. How would you know? The whole film, to me, is about, yes, there's a love story and yes, whatever, but it's about somebody waking up from inside a cult and decides to take the cult down. Now, people say, oh my God, Mark, you see cults and everything. Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, I see coercion. When I see coercion, I should say, I start to see the pattern that exists in a cult. So for me, certain movies, like another movie, Logan's Run, the original Logan's Run, it's about a cult. The Island, which was the remake, it's about a cult. The Truman Show, it's about a cult. Was it Ed Harris, who's the TV controller? He's running this experiment, and Jim Carrey's character finally wakes up. I do love waking up films. Like I really love waking up films, and I think it's because I think that's the journey, of the human spirit, of the human being, is to actually wake up. And I think that we're all caught in these narrative structures. And I'm not saying that I'm not caught in a narrative structure, just FYI, not at all. But I'm saying that it feels like life sometimes is becoming about a series of wake-ups, of realizing certain things that were not true. And I keep thinking about, when you're little, you believe certain things, and maybe you're taught those things for good reasons or bad reasons, and you start to wake up bit by bit to realize like that's actually not true. But I think what happens at a certain point, with all the pressures of society and our social groups and media and everything, we start to believe, well, this is now the truth. And certainly I can say for myself that in 2017, I had one of those wake-ups, and realized, holy shit, this is not the truth. So look, just to recap, I think that otherizing is very, very dangerous. It's really dangerous. And I just really urge all of us to keep on questioning the narrative that we're being shown. What's the information we're not being shown? What are you not allowed to talk about? What are you not allowed to muse about? What are you not allowed to question? Because any system where questioning is met with vitriol and ridicule, there is a problem. There really is a problem. That's a good rule of thumb, I think. If you're looking at any system and if you ask a question and you get ridiculed or maybe they even trying to destroy you for asking that question, it's a very good question. And it might be good to keep asking it. So those are my thoughts for today on Oblivion. I think I will actually do an episode at some point about Logan's Run. If you guys haven't seen Logan's Run, you got to see it. It's very, very dated. With Michael York and a few other, well-known actors. Very, very dated. But really also such a fascinating film. And if you haven't seen Oblivion, as I said, I have ruined the entire thing for you. But honestly, it's such a great film. I've seen Oblivion probably... I watched it again this morning before I did this episode for I think the 5th time. It's that good. I hope you guys watch it again if you've seen it already, or if you've never seen it, watch it for the first time. I think those are my thoughts for the day. As always, I really appreciate you listening in. Please support me on Patreon if you can, and as always, stay curious.